For centuries, the story of Rome has been written by the elite, the senators, the patricians, the men born into power. The narrative we know is one of marble halls, dynastic succession, and a very specific image of what a Roman emperor should be. But in the chaos of a dying dynasty, a new kind of leader would emerge, not from the gilded hills of Rome, but from the sun-scorched shores of North Africa. This is the story of a man who broke all the rules, who shattered tradition, and who dragged the Roman Empire into a new era, proving that its greatest strength wasn't in its center, but in its provinces. This is the story of Lucius Septimius Severus. He was an outsider, a provincial with a thick Punic accent who would rise higher than any African before him. He would command a massive army in Britain, conquer Rome's most feared enemy, and tear up the old rulebook that defined what it meant to be emperor. His reign was a brutal, brilliant, and transformative chapter that set the stage for the final act of the Roman Empire. So, how did a man from modern-day Libya rise to control the most powerful empire on Earth? To understand the man who broke the rules, we first have to go to the city that made him, Lepcis Magna. Today, its magnificent ruins lie on the coast of Libya, a ghostly testament to Roman grandeur. But back in 145 AD, it was a bustling, thriving metropolis, a hub where the cultures of Africa, Phoenicia, and Rome all collided. It was here that Lucius Septimius Severus was born into a wealthy and distinguished family. His family was the perfect reflection of the city's multicultural spirit. On his mother's side, he was descended from Italian settlers, Roman elites who had made their home in North Africa. But his father's family was Punic, descendants of the original Phoenician colonists. This mixed heritage made him a true son of the provinces. He was a Roman citizen, yes, but he wasn't one of the old guard. He was an outsider, not by law, but by culture and geography. His contemporary, the historian Cassius Dio, made a point of mentioning his pronounced African accent, something that surely marked him as different throughout his career in Rome. Growing up in Leptis Magna, Severus was surrounded by a different kind of ambition. Here, wealth came from olive oil and trade, not just inherited land. This world forged a man who was pragmatic, shrewd, and wasn't weighed down by the traditions that so often paralyzed the Roman Senate. He got a first-class education, but his perspective was always wider than the 7 hills of Rome. He started his career like many ambitious young men, moving through the sequence of public offices under emperors Marcus Aurelius and his wild son Commodus. He served as a senator and held posts across the empire, building a reputation for being competent, but not much else. To the Roman elite, he was likely just a capable, if unremarkable, provincial senator. One classicist described him at this point as a middling senator of modest physical stature and unexceptional accomplishment. But history has a way of finding the right person at the right time. In 191 AD, Severus was appointed governor of Pannonia Superior, a province on the critical Danube frontier. This wasn't some quiet desk job. It came with the command of a large, battle-hardened army. For the first time, the unexceptional senator from Africa had real power. He had the loyalty of thousands of the empire's toughest soldiers, and as fate would have it, the Roman world was about to collapse into chaos, creating a vacuum that only a man with an army and an outsider's ambition could possibly fill. The year 193 AD is known as the Year of the 5 Emperors, and it was one of the most violent and chaotic periods in Rome's history. It all kicked off on New Year's Eve of 192 with the assassination of the hated Emperor Commodus, which set off a political firestorm. The first man to claim the throne was Pertinax, a respected general who tried to get the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's bodyguards, under control. 3 months later, they murdered him for it. What happened next was an absolute disgrace. The Praetorian Guard, in an act of stunning arrogance, put the imperial throne up for auction. The winning bidder was a wealthy senator named Didius Julianus, who promised them a fortune for their support. He literally bought the empire, but he couldn't command its respect. The people of Rome were disgusted, and more importantly, the powerful armies on the frontiers were furious. News of the auction spread like wildfire. In 3 different corners of the Roman world, 3 powerful generals were hailed as emperor by their own troops. In Syria, there was Pescennius Niger; in Britain, Clodius Albinus; and in Pannonia, standing before the formidable Danubian legions, was Septimius Severus. Of the 3, Severus had the geographic advantage. He was closest to Italy. He also played his politics brilliantly. He didn't present himself as another usurper, but as the avenger of Pertinax, a move that gave him the appearance of legitimacy. While his rivals hesitated, Severus acted. He gathered his legions and marched on Rome with incredible speed. Support for Didius Julianus melted away. The Senate, seeing which way the wind was blowing, declared him a public enemy and sentenced him to death. Severus took Rome without a fight. One of his first acts was to deal with the Praetorians. He summoned them, unarmed, to a field, surrounded them with his own soldiers, and dismissed every last one of them. They were stripped of their status and banished from the city. In their place, he created a new guard, staffed by veteran soldiers from his own loyal legions. It was a clear signal. The old rules were gone. Power now came from the army. But securing Rome was just the first step. He still had 2 rivals. In a cunning move, he pacified Clodius Albinus in Britain by naming him Caesar, or Junior Emperor, essentially promising he'd be next in line. With his western flank secure, Severus marched east to face Pescennius Niger. The civil war was brutal, but the decisive battle came at Issus in 194 AD. Severus was victorious. Niger was captured and killed. Now only one rival remained. Severus elevated his own son, Caracalla, to the rank of Caesar, breaking his promise to Albinus and making his intentions crystal clear. It was a declaration of war. Albinus crossed from Britain into Gaul with his legions, and the final showdown took place in 197 AD at the Battle of Lugdunum in modern-day Lyon, France. It was one of the largest and bloodiest battles in Roman history, with as many as 150,000 Romans fighting each other. The battle was ferocious and hung in the balance. At one point, Severus himself was thrown from his horse and nearly defeated, but he rallied his men and ultimately crushed Albinus's forces. The African outsider had done it. He had survived the year of the 5 emperors and now stood as the sole, undisputed master of the Roman Empire. But his victory was secured with utter ruthlessness. Back in Rome, he purged the Senate, executing dozens of senators he suspected of supporting his rival. The message was unmistakable. Loyalty was everything, and the price for dissent was death. The provincial from Lepcis Magna had conquered Rome. Now he would remake it. Having won the empire with the sword, Septimius Severus would rule by it. His reign, lasting until 211 AD, marked a radical shift. He got rid of the old pretense that the emperor was just the first citizen among equals. Severus established an open military monarchy, where the army was the supreme source of power. His philosophy was best captured by the advice he supposedly gave his sons on his deathbed. Get along, pay the soldiers, and ignore everyone else. And he practiced what he preached. He dramatically increased soldiers' pay, and in a major break with tradition, overturned a long-standing ban and officially allowed them to marry while in service. This boosted morale and tied the army even closer to the provinces. In a move that shocked the old guard, he stationed one of his new legions, the Secunda Parthica, just outside of Rome itself, a permanent, looming reminder of where true power now lay. The The Senate was systematically sidelined. Severus openly distrusted them, promoting men based on loyalty and skill, many from the provinces like himself, rather than old family names. This was more than a political shift. It was a social revolution. He was breaking the Italian aristocracy's monopoly on power and opening up the government to the wider empire. His legal reforms were just as groundbreaking, and his patronage of brilliant jurists like Papinian and Ulpian would shape Western law for centuries. But Severus was a soldier at heart, and a soldier seeks glory in battle. In 197 AD, he launched a massive campaign against the Parthian Empire. It was a stunning success. His legions marched down the Euphrates, sacked the capital Ctesiphon, and annexed northern Mesopotamia. He took the title Parthicus Maximus, a clear echo of the great conqueror Trajan. He also campaigned in his native Africa, and he poured money into his hometown of Leptis Magna, transforming it into a magnificent city that could rival any in the empire. Toward the end of his life, his focus shifted to the misty northern frontier of Britain. In 208 AD, at the age of 63 and suffering from severe gout, Severus traveled to Britain with a massive army, perhaps as many as 50,000 men, one of the largest forces the island had ever hosted. His goal was to finally conquer Caledonia, modern Scotland. For 3 years, the Roman Empire was effectively ruled from York. The campaign was a brutal slog against guerrilla tactics. The historian Cassius Dio claims that a frustrated Severus gave his troops a chilling order to kill everyone they encountered. While the true scale of the violence is debated by historians, it's clear the campaign was ferocious, pacifying the region for a generation. Severus was a paradox. He was a reformer who stabilized the empire after years of chaos. He refilled the treasury and strengthened the frontiers. Yet the cost was immense. His massive military spending placed a crushing tax burden on the civilian population. And by creating a state so dependent on the army, many historians, most famously Edward Gibbon, argue that Severus put Rome on the path to the crisis of the 3rd century, an era of military anarchy that nearly destroyed it. He had saved the empire, but in doing so, he may have planted the seeds of its destruction. Severus's final campaign in Britain would be his last. The harsh climate took its toll, and crippled by gout, he died in Eboracum, modern York, on February 4th, 211 AD. He was 65 and had ruled for nearly 18 years. His ashes were carried back to Rome and laid to rest in the mausoleum of Hadrian. He left the empire to his 2 sons, Caracalla and Geta, with the dying wish that they get along. They didn't. Within a year, Caracalla had his brother murdered. The Severan dynasty, founded in war, would rule for another 2 decades before it, too, ended in violence, plunging the empire into a half-century of chaos. So what is the legacy of Septimius Severus? Was he a savior or a destroyer? The truth is, he was both. He was a ruthless autocrat, but also a brilliant reformer who restored order. Most importantly, he shattered the unwritten rule that the master of the Roman world had to come from Italy. His reign proved that the strength of the empire now lay in its provinces. He was the first in a long line of provincial soldier emperors who would dominate Rome's later history. His African origins are central to his story, proving that a man of Punic and Libyan heritage could rise to the very pinnacle of power, forever changing what it meant to be Roman. The boy from Leptis Magna didn't just rule Rome, he redefined it. He broke the rules, and in doing so forged a new, more complicated, and ultimately more fragile Roman Empire. The story of Rome is filled with figures who defied expectations. If you want to explore more stories of the emperors who shaped the ancient world, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, and let us know in the comments. Do you see Septimius Severus as a great reformer who saved a failing state, or as a tyrant who set it on a path to ruin?